everybody, and welcome to this episode of Smart Entrepreneurship Decoded. Normally, we have guests who have either followed entrepreneurship as a passion or they had a midlife burnout or didn't get a job and became an entrepreneur by force or by compulsion, not choice. Today, we have a different kind of guest. Today, we have somebody who's from the media world, successful media world, somebody who's done television journalism, somebody who's done print journalism, very successfully in the entrepreneurship space, somebody who's written books on entrepreneurship. Normally in India, you would think somebody like this will go on to set up a digital channel like Transcontinental Times or become a screaming talking head on television, backed by a political party. But she, and it's a she, but she is not like that. She ventured into education, much like myself. She is Shreyasi Singh, very accomplished, great journalism background, but now with Harappa education over the last 5-6 years, she's stamping an absolutely new path in skilling, upskilling people of all ages. I've had the privileges of having her on a panel for the Indonesia Education Forum a couple of weeks ago. And I was very impressed. And I requested her to be a guest on the show, and she kindly consented. So let's welcome Shreyasi Singh, and let's try to decode her journey and try to find out and get some insights which will help us in our own journeys as we go through entrepreneurship. Welcome, Shreyasi.
Thank you, Nalin. Thank you so much. So wonderful to be on the show.
So I have already seen a lot of your interviews, and most of the people who want to know a little bit about you have got all the cliched, puffed up stories that you gave in all the interviews. But tell me, why education? I mean, after journalism, which is peaking in this country, we have 800 odd news channels now. Why would you leave all that and get into education? I mean, what happened? One fine day you decided everybody needs to be educated, or what?
No, nothing happens one fine day. I don't think there are any such neat origin stories that you can wrap up and, the apple doesn't really fall one day and suddenly gives you some enlightenment. I think making counterintuitive or bold career choices comes out of a lot of angst and anxiety and restlessness that you feel. So it's a longer journey. So if others are feeling like that too, please, it's normal. It's good if you're feeling a little bit of restlessness and angst. I think why leave journalism is one question, and then why education is the second question. I don't think I left journalism necessarily to enter education. I left journalism for its own reasons, and then thought about what I might want to do as a second career or whatever. So I think the reasons to leave journalism are actually for all its many channels and things like that. I actually feel like the last 10 years that I was in journalism, which is now 5-6 years back, I feel like I've consistently actually moved away from mainstream television journalism. I actually started with that, and I think it was never to my taste and my appetite. I think television journalism was never to my taste and appetite because I enjoy writing, and you are second to visuals when you're a television journalist, as well as the way that the industry was being run, right? So then I moved from that to print. That also just suited as a working mother my lifestyle more, the variety of roles that I play much more, and generally managed to help me sort of do the kind of work that I wanted to do. I think why I eventually left is when I had wanted to be a journalist. I think there were 3 goals that I had in my mind that, were really important milestones to achieve. I really wanted to be the editor of a magazine. When you're reading, I've always been a voracious reader. So when you're through school or college, you read, you start, and I used to love magazines, right? You read, and the first thing you see is the editor's letter, and I would read every editor's letter of every magazine that I was a regular reader of. So there was such a personal milestone to have your own. When I was editor of Ink in India for 4 years, 2011 to 15, it's such a great personal milestone that month after month you have your editor's letter where you're able to opine and bring the issue together with your photo and byline. That very one big, very milestone was met. Second, I wrote a non-fiction narrative book on entrepreneurship and wealth creation in India, which was the second goal from journalism that I always had, is to write a book on journalism. And third was to
Did
have a
the
newspaper
did the
column.
book did the book happen before entrepreneurship or after?
Before.
And then you wanted to
It
prove
happened
what in
before.
the book is
So,
going to work.
yes, magazine editor, newspaper columnist, while I was working on the book, and eventually the book. All these three goals were achieved by 2015, 2016. And then I felt like, hey, there was actually no news publication or media house that I genuinely wanted to join and succeed in. There wasn't enough lateral growth. And by that time, my journalism over the last 7, 8 years before that was actually very focused on entrepreneurship. So I think I caught the entrepreneurship bug while reporting, while bringing out a magazine on entrepreneurship, writing a column on entrepreneurship, and writing a book on entrepreneurship. I think want to stop living vicariously and do something of my own from the ground up, right? So even before education came, it was sort of this growing. I didn't know it then. So you can only connect the dots looking back. But I think there was this growing urge and restlessness to do something of my own. Now, it wasn't like at all so that, I want to work in higher education, not at all. There were two things that I did all of these personal, I made my own little Venn diagrams to say, what am I good at? What do I like? Whatever, and when I was making this decision, I was, in my mid 30s. So I still have 30, 40 years, 30, at least a minimum 30-year career. So it's not a meaningless decision. It's not like, you can just do anything you want to build this. And I realized that entrepreneurship was the thing that I wanted to build on. And I was also very interested in professional women's issues, right? I had set up with some other very senior women a not-for-profit for women's issues. So when a chance came, as I was very sure, so first surety was that I didn't want to be a full-time journalist. Because I didn't see the scope. I had met the milestones that I wanted to do. And I had also discovered, more importantly, that I had many other skills that were not going to ever be properly used as a journalist or as a full-time journalist. So I made that decision and parked it. Then I said, okay, between what should I do? Then professional women's issues was an important thing. Like I said, I got a chance to work with who is my co-founder at Harappa right now. He was then setting up with someone else a women's only MBA program. And I felt like I could contribute there. I understood new age companies because of my entrepreneurship journalism. And actually, in that sense, even before higher education became this calling, it was through this women's only management program. Once I was there, I think I realized the power of the gratification you feel working in education, that you genuinely, in front of your eyes, you can see that somebody has transformed in a way that they will be a different person through their own life because of a course they did that you had put into the curriculum, an internship you got them that just became their calling, in many ways, much more than bylines and book covers. I think that sense of personal gratification and an honest day's work became very clear to me as in education. And then as I was working on that program, I also began to realize that my entrepreneurship urge was getting stronger and stronger. And I was feeling very boxed in by working in a place where I loved the work and I felt like I was having impact, but I couldn't fully control its trajectory, right? So I think that became really clear and education became really clear. And I think when those two things met is when the journey of Harappa really began. But it's
So
very messy and all of this happened over 24 to 30 months. So be patient, people who are trying to do this. It takes time to
yeah, but
understand.
still, I can understand you're connecting the dots later, and there was a messy time, but there still seems to be a certain thought process that was driving it, right? Uh, that you want to do certain things, which was ingrained in you from much earlier. When you went through the process, especially the first few years, how different was it from the book you wrote? Was it tougher? Was it like, aha, it's not like that?
It is. So you're asking as an entrepreneur. By the way, I don't think I would have been here if I hadn't written the book. I think the book was a very powerful, because my book was on first generation wealth creators, which is the potential and opportunity I have even with Harappa to be, right? And I interviewed over 100 people and 100 entrepreneurs in that book. So I think that book really taught me the power of ambition, and I think and made me feel like, listen, I met all these amazing people. If they could do it, I could do it too. The other thing that book taught me, which I think I now tell a lot of young people, which is what, one of the CEOs of this wealth management company that I Bhagat, he told me, success of the company you're in, and even more importantly, the industry you're in. And are those growing, right? So, for example, journalism is not growing. So, everybody is in these stuck, stagnant careers with nowhere to go, really. You're constantly in this horizontal. With education, the system is so broken, right? And there's just so many opportunities. You know that the industry is growing. You can have impact with that industry. And then if you create something your own. So, I think I would not be here without the book. Listen, I think entrepreneurship is tougher than anything else. It's tougher than writing a book, reporting on a
What
story,
is, tell me
being
what
on
is
a
the toughest
magazine.
part? Tell me what is the toughest part, especially as a woman entrepreneur in India. What's the toughest part? And I know you speak a lot on this topic on women entrepreneurship. What was the toughest thing as a woman entrepreneur?
So,
Do you come from an
so I
entrepreneurial
think one, it's
family?
I'm a Bihari, right? I was a good student, and I was a good liberal arts student. So as a proud Bihari, I was always only told that I was meant to be a bureaucrat, right? Like everything about me suggested that that I should be a bureaucrat. And obviously, I disappointed my family and my parents specifically by never even giving the exam, let alone trying to aspire for it meaningfully. So I'm not from an entrepreneur. I didn't know the word entrepreneurship while growing up till class 5 in Patna. This was not a cool word at that time. This has all become cool in the last 10 years. So not at all. Very Bihari bureaucrat, government service kind of family. So I'm on a very different path from what anybody would have thought that I would be, or even I could have imagined. Two things about what's difficult about being an entrepreneur. One, I think it's difficult for everyone, men and women, and I want to recognize that. I think there's a relentlessness of it and how self-motivated and self-disciplined you have to be. And that's actually very similar to a book. And I think that's very similar to any creators. You've written books and built movies. Nobody is banging down your door to say, listen, please write this book or please build this company, right? You have like this urge, crazy creative self-expression through a book or a movie or a company that you want to create, but nobody otherwise is waiting at all. Nobody's expecting it to be successful. All of that. So I think it needs a relentless conviction. It needs very high self motivation. It needs very high self discipline. These are only internal challenges. And then it needs timing, luck. It just like I find it amazing that the companies that are successful have just had so many lucky strokes, right? Like you can't script it; it just happens.
So
So
has
that's the tough part.
so has COVID been good for timing and luck?
I think so for a business like us. Unfortunately, although I wish I would did not happen, I would have taken the headwinds what the world and my country is going through right now. I would have taken the headwinds of being an edtech entrepreneur without COVID, but practically speaking, of course, it has very the tailwinds for a business like ours have and the consumer adoption for a business like an online learning institution obviously has been dramatically enabled by the last 15 months. It's so dichotomous to think of. Now to come to the women's entrepreneurship part. Listen, the toughest part is believing you can do it and feeling like you deserve to even have this ambition. I think that's very tough for women. I keep saying now very proudly that I'm a non-techie, non-MBA founder CEO of a tech-enabled business. I can see sometimes people looking at me so surprised as to how I can do it. Like,
Did
how
you
am I even
did,
doing this?
did you find difficulty in getting acceptance initially?
I think acceptance from whom, right? And how do you know you've got it? I mean, I don't even know, how do I know if I've got it now? So I think that's maybe the first toughest thing, is you have to stop seeking acceptance, and knowing that you're doing this for yourself. You don't need that every day of acceptance. You almost stop, when you stop expecting that, it's almost easier to take, right? That you have to be driven by your own path. But I have encountered a lot of disbelief, and I think many people would be, I'm sure, very surprised at what we managed to create, or what I have individually managed to create. And even now, I can see that sort of expression of skepticism or disbelief,
Do
that
you
someone like me is doing what she is.
do you see that more with investors? Because that's some old boys club.
I think so, and it's not just about. I think investors, they work a lot on mental models, right? I think they have investment thesis to say we will invest in disruptive technologies. Disruptive technologies come from people outside the system. They come from young early adopters. So I think there are many kinds of mental models that have worked for people, and it's true. I mean, there are only 2% of women in India CEOs, so most people have not invested in that many companies which has a woman co-founder. So I don't blame them, but yeah, I am sure, and nobody tells you these things, and I'm certainly not somebody who only has that frame of mind, that I'm constantly seeing myself as a victim, somebody discriminating against me. That's also not true. But I know enough to know that I'm sure they pause and think more times than they might if it was a 28-year-old IITian.
Yeah. It's interesting you say that, having raised money so much for companies. In India, I find more money lenders than investors, and a whole host of burnt out middle aged executives going around with trying to be mentors, exchanging equity for mentorship, and fake investors who are investors but have never invested in any company. And
That's true.
it's just crazy that our young people have to go through all this. But interestingly, here are two Biharis from Patna discussing entrepreneurship. I am from there as well.
In, oh wow, that's
So
such a wonderful serendipity. How
I,
nice.
on a channel that is from Spain, Transcontinental Times, absolutely brilliant. Were you self-funded at the start, or did somebody just give you a pot of money?
Nobody gives anyone a pot of money, but um, I think what I was, and I do want to say that no entrepreneurial journey is the same. I think everybody has their own challenges. It's the business you're in, it's your own mind space, it's the product, and I want to recognize and acknowledge my privileges as well, as much as I want to recognize and acknowledge my challenges. One is, of course, that my family situation. My husband's also a successful entrepreneur. My family situation, or my family's sort of economic status, has allowed me to take some of these bold decisions in my life. If I was in a family where my monthly income had to be steady, I would not be able to take those choices. So I think that's there. Second, my co-founder at Harappa, Prabhat, is a very noted pioneering figure in higher education in India, and he invested the first amount of capital that we did. So I didn't have to put money in, my own family savings in. And I think both of those, my personal situation and having a co-founder who had both expertise as well as the ability to get us started, were both very important advantages. And I don't take those advantages lightly. I feel like if I have those advantages, then I must do more than anyone else who's in my position who has those advantages. So those things have enabled a lot. And then eventually we raised a Series A round, as it's called,
Yeah.
after 2 years of Pramath bootstrapping it as sort of one of the founders.
So I'll come to the fundraising, but before that, for all the young entrepreneurs, how important is it to have a co-founder? I mean, what was your own experience? You spoke a little bit about it, but for young people, how important is it to have a co-founder? You made some very interesting points. You do need certain base necessities to be taken care of before you take the leap and risk. You do
Yes.
need your family backing and their buy-in into it as well, because you're going into uncharted territory, especially if you go later in life, right? We have things to pay for and there are responsibilities. You can't run away from that. But what's the role of a co-founder? How does that work?
So I think there's enough research, right? I think there's enough research around entrepreneurship that documents that two people co-founding teams have seen historically been seen to be the most successful, especially the kind of now of course the bias here would be that the kind of companies that have been documented, but I think that the data on that is quite clear that two or three, two I think, and then three member co-founding teams have been the most successful. So I think there is something to think about from that data. Um, I think so. I've also seen enough solo founders. Of course, like I was telling you about my husband, I think he's a solo founder. I've seen his challenges very different. I can't imagine having done it without a co-founder. I think there are two or three things you need to understand. Is one that are you bringing complementary skill sets but shared values, and is your shared goal the same? Do you in do you want the in 5 years to be there? Do you want to go slow and build a profitable business? Do you want to go big quickly and build a business that will require a lot of external funding? Or I think a lot of that. So when a co-founder works out, it's much better to have a co-founder. But this is this is the second, third relationship in your life after your spouse and things, which is can be so confrontational, adversarial, so many difficult conversations, so many tough personal dynamics, so much honesty it needs. So it's not easy. It can become its own thing to take
I,
care of.
I personally find it very difficult, right? I have two co-founders in Indonesia. One of them is a friend I have known for 40 years, and the other is a very accomplished public figure. So he is not involved in day-to-day affairs. But me and my friend of 40 years, it's so difficult to have the tough conversations, coach each other, uh, make sure that we don't descend to a lowest common denominator, but rise to a highest common factor. It's so tough. Yeah, I'm telling you, it's tougher than marriage. It's much tougher.
That's it
Do you
is.
feel the same? I mean,
It can be really tough on some days. And I think how do you maintain the difference between pushing each other, having that creative conflict as you build things, yet backing each other. Then when it comes to deciding who gets how much equity, there's like a lot of icky
very
conversations. So
different.
I think please don't do it if you're not ready to have like some really
Yeah,
uncomfortable and icky conversations. If you run away from those kinds of
very
conversations,
true.
you'll find it very difficult.
Very true. I meet so many young teams where there are three or four people of three or four of co-founders, and I ask them, "How is equity split?" They say equal. I say, "Oh my God! Even your five fingers are not equal. Even twins born together don't grow up equal. How can it be equal?" And these are very tough conversations. If you can't have them, and then you have to also have all the other conversations on strategy, people, uh, and at the end of the day, I think it boils down to mutual respect. Do you have?
Yes.
It's more than trust. I think it boils down to respect. Do you agree, or do you have a different view?
No, I absolutely agree. I think mutual respect. I think personal liking also. I think you have to like that person. You'll spend so much time with them that I think if they weren't your co-founder, would they be a friend? I think at least in my case. But most importantly, I agree with you. Mutual respect, not just for each other as individuals, but mutual respect for each other's skill sets. If you are to be a it's a resource, right? Your co-founder is a resource, like capital is a resource, your general manager is a resource, your technology is a resource, your co-founder is one of your biggest resources. So you must really have respect for what they bring to the table. And I so agree with what you said when you asked a three-member co-founding team, how have you split equity? One investor, this very wise investor, when I was still a journalist and writing the magazine, had told me that I really worry about co-founding teams when they tell me that the equity is equal, which is what you said, because which means that they've not been able to have the difficult conversation and are living in a rosy world. And the second, he had told me that I find it when there are 3 or 4 co-founding team members, they all divide responsibility by business lines and different P&Ls. He says that also suggests to me that you've actually not had the hard conversation about who is really good at what. Because if you really want to build a successful business, you will ensure that everybody is working on the top of the game and everybody is bringing their best self to the business. And if you can't actually agree what each other's strengths are,
And it was,
that doesn't save a lot about your relationship.
yeah. And for us, two guys, 50-year-olds, both had been CEOs of Fortune 500 companies, very accomplished. Initially, the third co-founder suggested that both of you be CEOs and run 2 divisions. I said that won't work. We need to have a single chain of command. So initially, my co-founder Sachin was the CEO, but this is where respect comes in. After 8 to 10 months of running it, he came to me and said, Nalin, you're actually better at running this. I have the local connections and I know Indonesia. Let me take a step back and help you, and with the ecosystem, you run the company. I think I'm coming in your way. This kind of respect and trust, if you don't have, uh, I don't think you can be co-founder. It's really difficult. I think in many ways it's tougher than marriage. I've said it more than once.
Yeah, it's true. And I think that's so true. So for example, in our case, and my co-founder is like 16, 18 years older than I am. So we're like almost like at least one generation, if not 2 generations apart. In that sense, we have a lot of diversity in the
So how do you push back? Tell me, how do you push back?
so he'll tell you that I push back. And that maybe those are skills of journalism. You've always learned how to speak truth to power. And I think every intelligent person, if they know that the space you're coming from is your conviction and your only and only, my moral clarity is this, do I think this is good for Harappa? I could be wrong, but in that moment, if I'm fighting for something or pushing back on something, my only and only moral clarity is this good for Harappa? And I think as long as me and my co-founder come from that place, I think that these conflicts are in the moment. And to give him all credit, because imagine now I am sort of this woman CEO with a co-founder who's anyway so accomplished and so many years older than I am, right? People will even think even more that, but he has been, to his full credit, he's the chairman of the board, of course, but he tells everyone that, I think, and everyone who works in the company knows for sure that, she's the CEO, so she'll take the decisions. So he will give inputs, and he's also assertive, but he'll give inputs. But I think that line, that the respect for the position, because that's how companies are run, and is, if somebody is the CEO, they do have to take the call, but they're also accountable for it then, right? So it's you can't take the privilege of being the boss and calling the shots and not take the accountability for whatever happens.
So let me ask you this. You have a big team, and you make it a point that every member of your team is on your website. It's one of the rare websites where I've seen. I kept scrolling down the team. I said, when will this stop? Normally, we put three,
But you
four
kept
people.
going. But you
It
kept
kept
going.
going, kept going. So beautiful, diverse team. I just loved that part of it. But talk to me about being a learning organization, and I run a similar organization in Indonesia, albeit in a different space. Being a learning organization, being a CEO, where people are looking up to you as a mentor, coach, guide, etc. How do you get your own coaching and guide? What is your circle? How do you find that circle which will give you objective advice? I'm not asking you to name those people, but how do you form that circle? Otherwise, you're lonely, right?
Sure. So I think, yes. So I think, we call this, and in fact, this is something we even address in the Harappa curriculum, almost like what's your personal solar system and who are the rings, right? Whether you want to include personal or even in professional, who's your closest ring of advisors and mentors? Who's your next ring of advisors and mentors, which would be much more on technical and industrial skills? What is the third ring from where you get it, which could actually be whatever? So I think a combination of 2 or 3 because I've always been a really strong and voracious consumer of content, and my journalistic background also, I read and I soak in and absorb a lot. So I think whether it's on edtech or on entrepreneurship, there's just amazing resources available for free, for example. And
You
I
said you you
for
said you
podcasts,
read.
podcasts. Yes,
You
so
said you read.
podcasts, right? Yes.
That is a lost skill. Nobody reads anymore. See, just that
Sorry,
makes you
I'm old
look like
fashioned.
from another generation and very old, right?
So I am old fashioned. So I think there is just so much. So that's my outer layer of professional mentorship and guidance, is you constantly reading from the best people and listening to podcasts and whatever. Then um, closer to the closer rings, of course. I don't think I am that person, and this is not me even in my personal life. That I don't think I'm a disciple kind of person. That this person is my guru. Like I don't have that. I don't think that's my preference as whatever. Um, what I have done, especially as an entrepreneur, I think I have realized that one needed to do this. Is there are 5 or 6 people for different things that I have really pushed myself to be very honest with them and very vulnerable with them for some part of the business that I have a challenge with, right? That I will go to them to say that, listen, I'm having this challenge and I want to talk about it. So I think my biggest forever has been talking about my challenges quite openly to 8 to 10 people broadly at no
So
fixed frequency, but as I
how
need them.
how important is that for an entrepreneur? Because it's a lonely path. They feel it's all uphill. They are doing it alone. How important is it for an entrepreneur to be with the few people where they can just be themselves without the aura of what they're doing or the problems of what they're doing?
I think very important, and even more important for an entrepreneur is to find 3 or 4 people who really believe in you. It's so difficult otherwise. Like you do need, and even your families and all will be they're supportive of you that you are successful and whatever, but they really can't help you in the kind of business that you're building, right? Like you can't expect them to be able to truly understand this. So I do think that not just having access to people who will take time to listen to you is very important. I think it's very important to have 3 or 4 people in your professional life, right? Who really who really believe in you and really give you that energy and encouragement, because sometimes all you need to be told is not like, oh my god, how should you do this. It's not that. Nobody can come and help solve your everyday problems. Every company is very unique, but they say, listen, calm down, you're on the right path, and listen, trust me, you'll do it. Just whatever. I think I really value that, and I really value and I've been very lucky to get a lot of goodwill from some very senior professionals who I've encountered, continue to encounter in my journey. I definitely feel like I get a lot of good energy and vibes. And I think also if people feel like you're really passionate about the idea and are trying to do something well with some sincerity, I think people do want to support you. I don't think people don't want to support you, but
Yeah.
even more so, I'm very careful that if anybody pings me, whether it's on LinkedIn or whatever, to say, listen, I just wanted to pick your brains, and I really try and make the time for it because I know how critical it is. So you constantly have to pay back as well, right?
True. Talk to me about fundraising. Was it as brutal as it is made out to be, or were you just lucky?
So, so again, like I said, because given that me and my co-founder are not like these completely unknown commodities, young, I do think it was easier. I think we got very lucky and fortunate with the investors that we have right now. They really believed and continue to believe in
So
the business
hold,
that we
hold
do.
that thought. So, do you think the founder's credibility is paramount in fundraising?
I don't think so. I don't. I it's See, that's the tough thing about entrepreneurship. There is no ratio and there is no equation, which is why it's so tough to do it, and which is why being successful at it is such a lottery or an unlikely journey because you don't know what works. So I never like try to give prescriptive things, but I'm just sharing our experience that I think it wasn't. But listen, we're going to go into another round of fundraising where the stakes are higher for us, for the investors. Our goals are much larger and bigger. And am I like, and the company has done well and it's in an exciting space and all of that, but am I not nervous? I'm very nervous. Do I not know that there won't be huge challenges? Yes, is it not tiring? I mean, it's immense. It's like a full-time job while having a full-time job while you're doing this. It really occupies. So it is very challenging. The no's can make you feel very dispirited in that time. Even the conversations of all kinds can really challenge you. So it is. It hasn't been brutal for us yet, but it is largely brutal, and it does require a lot of.
But in that process, because I know, however lucky you are, there is a process of negotiation and paperwork, which is quite frustrating. Did you at times think that, do we really need to raise money? I mean, can we not just continue the way we are?
No, so I mean, actually, the last bit of negotiations, there are lots of like I said, these kind of conversations which are not fun to have with each other, with the lawyers, with investors, and all of that, and that the whole audit and all of that is like mind numbing, right? And it's just like excruciating on some days. But no, I never felt like we don't need to do this because where will the money come from? I think again there we were very united with Harappa. We know that we want to build a scalable, scaled company, which is a really strong brand out in the world. That our vision and mission does require us to have financial muscle and the capital to invest in what we want to do. I think we are very clear. Like we don't want to do anything too small and niche. And so I think once you make your vision that, you have to accept the reality of what your vision will take. And if it needs to take external funding, no, I've only had gratitude that we've got it. I've never felt like, why did we take it? And in some way, people don't understand this enough about investors. In some way, your investors believe in you even more than your friends and family. And it's an intense form of delegation because they are parting with their money for you, not even asking you on an everyday basis. I mean, there's an immense amount of trust, respect, and no one is more incentivized other than your immediate family who might benefit from your wealth than your investor if you and your company do well. So it's actually, when done right, when mounted correctly, it's a very enabling dynamic between founders and investors.
How different is Shreyasi the person versus Shreyasi the person at office? Is it two different people, or is it just the same extension?
This is so, like, I don't know if you can ever answer this question without your own biases. I don't think too different. I'm sure I am different, but I don't think too different. I think I change a lot, and I think people around you, closest to you, sometimes actually don't want you to change. So, but I think I'm quite hungry for growth, right? And because I've done so many things, especially in the last 4 5 years, I do feel like I've changed a lot. But I think that change version is similar throughout. Um, yeah, I don't know if I can answer that question. You'll have to ask others
So,
who know me both at
okay,
work and at home.
I'm going to wind this down with another question, and then we'll wind this down. So obviously, when I was looking through what all you do, is there a foundation or a charitable site that you're working on?
Not right now, unfortunately. I think right now it's all very focused on the Harappa. My father actually, after he retired, runs a not-for-profit to help children, out of school children or even children who are in school and primary schools or actually senior schools in government schools, but whose parents are those children are first-generation learners and have no way for their parents to be able to coach and tutor them, so remedial. So I'm quite invested in that, but nothing formally or in a structured way right now at all.
So you come from a fairly, what we would call a stable, accomplished family, etc. Uh, why do you want to take all this trouble? What for? What's driving you?
Um, Ambition. I think, a couple of years back, I wrote this sort of personal vision statement for myself, and I'm executing that. I think I've owned it, and I think that's for if any women are listening. I've owned my ambition as a woman professional and entrepreneur to say that. So I'm sort of, and that ambition is not just for wealth. And I think wealth doesn't just buy you like nice holidays and nice things. That's of course it does. It buys you freedom and autonomy, and and I think that is just I think everybody should strive for freedom and autonomy, and also growth, like the experience of growth. I mean, like building Harappa has been such an incredible personal growth journey more than anything. I have learned so much. I've had to learn so much that in no other situation would I have learned. So I really value my personal growth, and I really want to feel like I fulfill all my potential. I think I'm very scared of not fulfilling my potential.
So what will be next? Given a choice, you've done journalism, television, print, writing a book, uh, higher education, company, entrepreneurship, Series A raised. Hopefully, many more series to come. And Harappa, well done. What would it be next for you?
So I think Harappa continues to be a calling and conviction, of course. So it's so difficult to put any timelines to this. But if I had to do something else, right now, or several years later, whenever time permits, I think it will be broadly in entrepreneur, like it will be an entrepreneurial activity. But I don't have to be a founder, but it's
You
just
are
that
not
I'm
a
building
Bihari.
something.
You are not a Bihari. A Bihari would have said politics.
नहीं 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 politics नहीं. I have to be a builder. Like I create. I think I want to create. And now just seeing everything around us in India right now, I genuinely feel like we have to invest so much in health. So something in healthcare, health tech, whatever. But only and only Harappa for now.
Okay. Last question. For such a modern company and for a young achiever like you, why did you choose a name that's so old from history?
You people asked us so many questions when we decided it's in modern day Pakistan. It's a dead civilization. You guys are the future. That was so old. This is tech enabled. But I have to tell you, Nalin, I think the day we decided to call our company Harappa was one of the most. There were three, I think, three very important, and we can talk about that sometime else. Three sort of moments in which I became very convinced that Harappa is what I really want to build and make successful over the next several years. But one moment was that naming of the company Harappa, and I'll tell you why. I think again, my co-founder and I we were very determined that our cultural heritage, even if this company goes to Indonesia, goes to the US, and as an online English language learning company, you can access markets outside of India. The fact that we are named Harappa will always be evocative of our cultural heritage. And I think that's something that we believe a lot in. We're proud Biharis and proud Indians. So I think that. And second, just the emotional resonance of the name, for it to be a pioneering civilization, for it to be as builders, for something to survive in people's imagination 5,000 years later, right? For it to have so many artifacts of excellence, I think the name really called out to us. It's
Yes,
sort of my
it
favorite
does.
things about the company.
The first time I heard it, I was very curious, as to why somebody would name a company like this over a 5,000-year-old civilization. But hearing you speak, I can completely understand that. It has been an absolute pleasure to have you, Shreyasi. I wish you the very
Thank you
best.
so much, Nalin.
Your company is doing pioneering work, and I hope that we'll be able to work together in Indonesia as well. All the best to you and your team, and have a great evening ahead. Thank you very much. Good night.
Thank you for having me, and thank you. Bye.
Thank you.